Wine is often described as a living thing, shaped by soil, climate, human hands, and time. But there's another layer we don't talk about nearly enough, and that's how the vine itself is chosen and propagated. In today's episode, we are going back, not forward, to explore why many of the world's finest vineyards are quietly abandoning modern uniformity in favor of an older, slower, and more thoughtful approach. This is the story of a Massal selection and why ancient wisdom is making a comeback. Welcome back to the VINVERITY Show. During the 1960s and 1970s, viticulture underwent a major shift. As vineyards expanded and modernized, clonal selection became the dominant method of vine propagation, promising consistency, predictability, and efficiency. And for a time, it delivered exactly that. But today, something interesting is happening. Many of the world's most respected vineyards, particularly those with deep roots and long memories, are quietly returning to the old way. Not out of nostalgia, but because time has revealed the limits of the uniformity brought to us by clonal selection. So, clonal selection begins with a single vine. This is often called the mother vine. And that vine is chosen for specific characteristics like yield, disease resistance, flavor profile, or even growth behavior. Cuttings are taken from that vine and propagated, producing genetically identical plants. Every vine is essentially a copy, uniform in DNA and personality. This method was first demonstrated in Germany in 1926, and later it was adopted worldwide. In theory, it offers control, predictable ripening, consistent yields, and targeted traits. But there's a trade off. When an entire vineyard is planted with genetically identical vines, diversity disappears. And without diversity, resilience weakens, but also character tends to drop off. The problem with uniformity is that even with careful monitoring and virus screening, clones can mutate and diseases can still spread. And over time, something more subtle happens. Vineyards begin to lose their individuality and their character. As one renowned Bordeaux estate famously observed, clonal plantings may deliver short term consistency, but in the long run, they risk erasing a vineyard's identity. That concern is one of the reasons that estates like Chateau Ligebage deliberately changed course. After decades of clonal planting, they returned to the old way of Massal selection before it was too late. And this brings us to one of the most revealing modern examples of this issue. New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc's extraordinary global success was built in large part on a lack of clonal diversity. Most vineyards are planted using essentially the same generic individual, often the UCD1 clone, because it delivered exactly what the market wanted at the time: highly aromatic wines, consistent flavor, and efficient vineyard management. And for decades, that uniformity worked incredibly well. But it also created a genetic monoculture. When nearly every vine is genetically identical, the entire industry becomes vulnerable to pest, diseases, and environmental shifts. It's a bit like planting only one variety of apple across an entire country. Efficient, yes. Resilient, not long term. So today, the New Zealand wine industry has recognized the risk and is responding proactively. Projects often referred to as a Sauvignon Blanc 2.0 are now underway. This is led by research institutes and industry groups using genomic research and breeding programs to develop new, diverse Sauvignon Blanc clones. The goal isn't to abandon the signature New Zealand style, but it is to build diversity back into the vineyard, developing vines with beneficial traits like disease resistance and climate adaptability while trying to remain true to what makes New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc unmistakable. In other words, the industry is future proofing itself and moving beyond reliance on a single clone. And this brings us back to Massal selection, which is sometimes described as the old way, but that definitely doesn't make it outdated. Before commercial nurseries existed, vineyards were planted by selecting cuttings from the best performing vines within the vineyard itself or from nearby sites with similar conditions. These vines weren't chosen after a single good year, they were selected after many vintages for their quality, balance, longevity, and their natural disease resistance. Each cutting carries slightly different genetics, and no two vines are exactly the same. So, the result is a vineyard with genetic diversity, greater resilience, and crucially, wines that express place more clearly. Now, it's important to pause here because Massal selection isn't automatically virtuous just because it sounds traditional. It can also be done lazily. In its most careless form, Massal selection simply means taking cuttings from vines that appear to perform well, often based on yield or visual vigor, without long term observation, without disease screening, and without understanding how those vines behave across different conditions. In other words, it becomes haphazard selection, not a thoughtful selection. And when that happens, the benefits we associate with Massal selection, like resilience, individuality, and terroir expression, can be lost just as easily as with clonal monoculture. True Massal selection isn't about choosing the biggest or most productive vine. It's about choosing vines that have proven balance, longevity, and quality over time. So, without that discipline, Massal selection risks becoming a romantic label rather than a meaningful practice. Proponents of Massal selection argue that diversity is not a weakness, it's a strength. In a Massal vineyard, individual vines respond differently to stress, disease spreads less catastrophically, and ripening occurs with nuance rather than uniformity. And in the glass, that diversity translates into wines with depth, texture, and complexity, wines that feel full of character rather than engineered uniformity. This approach is slow, it's labor intensive, and it requires patience measured in decades, not seasons. But for those pursuing true excellence, Massal selection is not a shortcut, it's a true commitment. One of the most powerful examples of Massal selection's impact is Cabernet Sauvignon itself. In the 1600s, Cabernet Sauvignon emerged naturally in Bordeaux. This was a spontaneous crossing of Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. At some point in the vineyard, wine growers noticed something special. And through Massal selection, vine by vine, cutting by cutting, they propagated this newfound grape across different vineyards. There were no clones, no laboratories, just observation, patience, and trust in this newfound vine. Cut to today, Cabernet Sauvignon is the most widely planted and one of the most adored grapes in the world. A global success story rooted in the ancient practice of Massal selection. In today's modern reality, clonal selection still has a big place. It can support consistency, research, and vineyard renewal when done thoughtfully and continuously. But increasingly, top producers are recognizing that diversity in the vineyard safeguards the identity of their wines. And identity is the soul of fine wine. So, Massal selection isn't about rejecting modern science, it's about balancing it with wisdom earned over centuries. Beautiful wine is not meant to be uniform, and neither are the vineyards that beautiful wine comes from. So, Massal selection and renewed genetic diversity offer something that's quietly radical. It's a return to individuality, resilience, and place. Sometimes the most forward thinking choice is to go back. And that's a wrap on our mini dive into Massal's selection. If you liked today's episode, please give it a like, a share, and be sure to subscribe to be notified of all future episodes. And until next time, in wine there is truth.